I never imagined that the moment I stood before her, coffee mug trembling in my hand, would mark the turning point in a battle I hadn't even realized I was fighting. The sun was just cresting the horizon when Karen's red SUV screeched to a halt beside my worn gravel driveway. She stomped out in her HOA polo shirt size XXL stretched tight across her chest, her face twisted into a triumphant sneer as she pointed a manicured finger at my humble cabin. "You have 48 hours to remove that eyesore," she barked, her voice echoing off the pine trees. My heart pounded because by rights, my grandfather's deeds stretched beyond this plot, but I kept that fact close to my chest. Here, in this silent woodland, I was alone against her entitlement until the truth began to surface. In the days that followed, I watched Karen and her cronies parade through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, citing city ordinances she pretended to know, threatening fines and legal action as though she were the judge, jury, and executioner. The air buzzed with whispered fear. Who could afford to fight a swift-moving, well-funded HOA board? Yet every time Karen stomped into my yard, flinged her complaints at my feet, I felt a flicker of something stronger than anger, determination. Late one evening, I pulled out the old survey maps buried in my attic, yellowed with age and annotated in my grandfather's spidery handwriting. As I traced the boundary lines, shock raced through my veins. The property line cut directly under Karen's manicured flower beds and her HOA clubhouse. Her claims were naked aggression. Her authority was built on shaky ground. Armed with this revelation, I plotted my response. Instead of confronting her immediately, I invited her to a neighbor's gathering under the pretense of harmony. I prepared coffee, set out pastries, and watched her swagger into my modest cabin only to find herself face to face with my attorney, a steady presence who casually unrolled those survey maps across my dining table. Her smug grin faltered as she read the legal jargon. "Your HOA clubhouse sits on Mr. Jennings's land. Your so-called bylaws have no jurisdiction here." I saw color drain from her cheeks as the room went silent, neighborly chatter dying in frightened, excited stares. Her carefully constructed power crumbled in that moment when truth spoke louder than bylaws. But the real confrontation happened days later, when Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She arrived at dawn with bolts of chain-link fence and industrial machinery, determined to tear down the cabin by force. I stood at the edge of the clearing, binoculars in hand, heart thundering as I recorded her every move on my phone. Neighbors emerged from behind trees and hedges, drawn by the metallic clang and Karen's furious shrieks. When she pried loose a rotten beam from my porch, I walked calmly into her path and said, "I hope you brought more than a clipboard today, Karen." She lunged at me, breath hot with fury. But the moment she saw the assembled neighbors behind witnesses to her trespass, her bravado evaporated. I pressed record on my phone and shouted, "This is an illegal eviction. Karen, you're trespassing on private property." The world seemed to tilt as she backed away, the machinery idling uselessly behind her. Deep inside, I hadn't expected mercy. I wanted justice, and I was ready to ram every bolt of the law down her throat. Yet when I looked into Karen's deflated face, her hair mussed, her makeup streaked, I felt a flicker of pity. Not forgiveness, but a recognition that entitlement can warp even the steeliest of wills. I handed her the phone. "Here's evidence for the county sheriff," I said evenly. She swallowed, nodding so fast I thought her head would spin off her shoulders. In the aftermath, I watched as the HOA board disbanded, its bank account frozen pending investigation, its bylaws rendered obsolete by one buried deed. My cabin stood defiantly in the clearing, sunrise painting its worn siding in gold. Neighbors came by with casseroles and congratulations, marveling that one deed, one family history, could append an entire empire of greed. The real victory wasn't tearing down a corrupt association. It was reminding everyone that land and legacy, when rooted in truth, outlast the loudest bullhorn. So here I stand, cabin door open, wind rustling through the pines, holding my grandfather's deed like a torch passed down across generations. Karen's SUV is gone for good, and the neighborhood is breathing easier, freed from the tyranny of self-appointed rulers. This is more than my triumph. It's a testament that justice, once unearthed, cannot be buried again under rules made by the wrong people. If you believe in standing up, in drawing your line in the dirt and defending what's rightfully yours, share DISAGREE below, and let's talk about who in your life needs a wake-up call. Everything shifted the morning the county sheriff's deputy arrived under the banner of authority, uniform crisp despite the early dampness in the air, and declared Karen's actions null and void, her claim to the land extinguished by the cold, hard truth of my grandfather's deed. Word spread fast, whispers turning to cheering voices as neighbors gathered at the edge of my property, eyes bright with vindication. Karen was nowhere to be seen, her car absent, her voice silenced at last. Yet I sensed the embers of her rage still smoldering somewhere, waiting for a spark to ignite. That afternoon, I went to the old logging road behind my cabin and discovered that someone, Karen, no doubt, had scrawled crude threats on the trees. Evict or be sorry. My heart pounded, not in fear for myself but for the fragile sense of security this place now represented. I knew retaliation was inevitable, but I refused to let her terrorize me or my neighbors again. I gathered evidence of her trespass over the past week's photos, videos, timestamps, and handed them over to the sheriff's office. The deputy assured me he'd file formal charges for attempted property destruction and trespassing, and that a restraining order was already on its way. Relief washed over me, but beneath it simmered something unexpected: compassion for my besieged community. I realized that Karen's reign of intimidation had scarred more than just landlines. It had eroded trust among families and friends. I decided to host a neighborhood potluck at the cabin clearing, inviting everyone, including Karen if she dared show so we could reclaim our shared space and heal. On the evening of the gathering, fairy lights twinkled among the pines, tables creaked under the weight of casseroles and pies, and laughter echoed where tension once lingered. Children ran barefoot on the grass, neighbors swapped stories and recipes, and even old Mrs. Caldwell, who'd stayed holed up in her house for years, emerged to offer me a slice of cherry pie. As we sat around a fire pit, I stood and raised my mug. "Tonight," I said, voice steady against the crackle of flames, "we choose community over control. We choose truth over tyranny." Glasses clinked, and a chorus of "Hear, hear" rose. Karen did not appear. Instead, we spoke her name with a mixture of disdain and pity, acknowledging that entitlement can blind us to our own humanity. Then a surprise twist unfolded. One of Karen's own board members, a quiet man named Franklin who'd often flanked her with dutiful nods, stood and apologized. He confessed he'd been coerced into supporting her schemes out of fear of her accusations and public shaming. His voice quivered as he admitted he'd never believed in her cause, but had gone along to protect his wife and children from gossip. Neighbors murmured approval as Franklin promised to help rebuild the trust Karen had shattered. In that moment, I felt the true power of collective courage. Not just standing up to a bully, but reaching out to those trapped in her orbit and offering them a path back to integrity. Over the next weeks, under Franklin's quiet leadership, the old HOA board dissolved itself formally, surrendering any remaining control. The clubhouse was repurposed into a community workshop where we fixed fences, painted cabins, and repaired the communal garden beds that Karen had let wither. We held town meetings under the open sky, passing simple guidelines that respected property rights and neighborly courtesy, drafted by those who lived here and answered to no one but one another. Karen's fate was sealed when the district attorney pressed charges. Her trial made local headlines as a cautionary tale of power abused. I testified, calm and concise, recounting the hours I'd spent documenting her illegal actions and the fear she'd instilled in our neighborhood. The jury found her guilty of trespassing, destruction of private property, and harassment. She was fined heavily, ordered to perform community service repairing public parks, and banned from any HOA activities for 5 years. When the gavel fell, sealing her downfall, I felt no triumphal glee, only relief that justice had been served and that our lives could move forward unburdened by her greed. In the aftermath, I restored my cabin with fresh paint and new shingles, turning once rotted beams into sturdy supports. I planted a row of wildflowers along the driveway, each bloom a testament to resilience and renewal. Neighbors helped haul firewood, hang curtains, and repair the porch railings, our collective sweat and laughter weaving a new tapestry of trust. At dawn, I often walk the perimeter of the property, tracing the boundary lines with my fingers, marveling that land so static on paper can become so alive through the hands and hearts of those who respect it. The cabin now stands not as a lonely outpost but as a gathering place, where the smell of coffee and fresh bread mingles with the scent of pine needles and morning dew. At night, the windows glow warmly, casting light onto the silent forest, a beacon of what's possible when courage meets compassion. So this is my story, a tale of a pompous tyrant brought low by the unyielding force of truth and community spirit, of land reclaimed not with violence but with deeds, documentation, and dignified resistance. If you've ever faced a Karen in your life, someone who demands power without merit, who uses fear to control, remember that the pen of legality and the hearts of your neighbors can outmatch any self-appointed ruler. Share right if you believe in standing up, in digging through dusty deeds and legalese to uncover justice, and in lifting others along the way. Or share wrong if you think some battles aren't worth the fight. Let's ignite this conversation and empower each other to draw our lines in the dirt and defend them with honor.